the most, I think, beneficial piece of advice that I got when I was with the Disney band was actually from our band leader, Ron McCurdy, who told us to go write. And it was one of his kind of concepts that, when you compose, when you arrange, you access a level of musicianship that's not necessarily approached in your playing. And so he challenged all of us to go just write something down. And I had kind of done that before a little bit, but that's one of the moments where I kind of thought, let me go do that. And let me really take that assignment kind of seriously. And that led to the jazz chart that I wrote that summer. I asked, and I was like, hey, can we read this at some point? And Ron goes, yeah, we have a week at the end of the program where we have some free space in our set. Why don't you rehearse it? Get the band sharp. And if it sounds good, we'll play it in the park. And so it's kind of a really once in a lifetime, really rare scenario. My first jazz chart that I wrote was premiered by the Disneyland All-American College Band. And it was the first time I ever wrote something down and had live musicians just kind of play it straight from my head. I had arrangements played before, but that was the first original material that originated in the brain, got onto a computer screen, and then on a piece of paper in front of musicians. And they took that paper and brought it to life. And just a completely transformative experience. And I mean, there are experiences like that in many shapes and forms everywhere. And you never know until you just go do it. So if there's anything at all in your mind, on your heart, write it down and then go write some more.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, JaRod Hall. Hi, JaRod.
Hi.
Welcome to the Everything Band podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, JaRod, can you introduce yourself for the listeners? Tell them who you are, what you're all about.
Sure. So my name is JaRod Hall, and I'm currently a Dallas-Fort Worth-based band director. Turned composition. I mean, that was kind of my side hustle for a long time, my side gig, and really just started out kind of as a hobby. And how I got into the composing thing is actually kind of wild. But now it's just, it's my home away from home. I spend all the hours in the office, and then when I get home, composition is a great just kind of release and use of creative flow and everything. So it's been a fun journey so far. I got some new pieces coming down the pike and some that are already kind of up there and published. So it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. And your name is, I mean, you kind of burst on the scene as far as I was concerned. You just suddenly JaRod's there and it's like, okay, I have to talk to him. I have to find out what he's all about.
Absolutely.
So can you tell everyone your origin story? How'd you get started in music? And maybe talk a little bit about those early years.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up in the Texas public school system, everybody kind of gets their first real hand at the fine arts scene when they're in the middle schools. And I went to DeWitt Perry Middle School in Carrollton, Texas. And I honestly cannot tell you how or why I joined the band program. It was on the options that they handed us as kids. And I thought, I have no idea what I want to do next year. And for some reason, my pencil circled band. I don't even remember doing it. But the next thing I know, I was in Mr. Schmidt's band hall trying out all the instruments. Mr. Schmidt was actually my buddy's dad. Me and Scott, his son Scott Schmidt, and I were pretty close. And it just kind of just went from there. I mean, I found myself in the cafeteria, surrounded by all these instruments, and of course, like every 11-year-old kid, I was like, "Well, I want to play the trumpet." And Mr. Schmidt goes, "Well, okay, let's give that a quick shot." And it did not sound good. I mean, oh my goodness. I think my mom may have tried to run out of the building. And after we tried all of the shiny bells and whistles, and then finally Mr. Schmidt was like, "All right, JaRod, let's try one more thing." And he handed me a tuba, and my first thought was, "Oh no. That's not, nope." I actually felt good kind of playing it. I mean, he kind of instructed me very minimally, of course, but just to kind of see how I would kind of attach to the instrument. And man, it's history from there. Coolest thing I've ever done is, say yes to the tuba. And that kind of carried me through the rest of my time in public school. As I was kind of finding my place, I found that band was kind of a safe haven for me. And, I was just kind of all wrapped up in it. As I went, through the high school and middle school kind of scene, Texas, you get 3 years in middle school. So by the time I was an 8th grader, I had already started to just kind of take on auditions and stuff like that for all region. And by the time I got to high school, I advanced all the way to the Texas All-State level for all four of my years there at R.L. Turner High School. So it became very obvious to me very quickly that this was something that I needed to investigate more and kind of put all of my energy into. And I just loved it. As much as I gave music, it gave me more back in return. So just kind of grateful for that. A lot of my contemporaries that went through Perry and Turner, we were kind of in each other's circles, all throughout, kind of lived in the same neighborhood and stuff like that. One of my older kind of contemporaries, name was Thomas Steffen. And Thomas, I remember he just announced, he was my head drum major when I was in high school, and he announced one day, I'm going to the University of North Texas to study music education. And I was like, that's cool. Thomas is cool. I want to do that. That sounds like a good time. And when I settled on North Texas as a school, of course, I applied to all of the kind of public universities and stuff like that. But I think what really sold me on it was one all-region clinic when I was a senior in high school. And our clinician was Dr. Nicholas Williams. And man, he just showed out. He was awesome. He was the most inspirational conductor I'd ever seen. I didn't even know you could be nearly that funny and also an amazing conductor at the same time. I had no idea. And of course, he wrote his school on the board, which was the University of North Texas. And that was it. I was like, yep, that's the place. And I'm so glad I went, because that was a university where I got kind of my take at a whole bunch of different opportunities. I was involved in the lab bands. I was involved in tuba euphonium choirs, trombone choirs, marching band, the Wind Symphony, the symphonic band. I joined an a cappella group at one point. I tried my hand at singing, which was actually pretty cool, the UNT Green Tones. And I just kind of got wrapped up in a whole bunch of music stuff in as many ways as possible. And it served me well. I had a great time, but I also met a lot of really cool people. And along the way, I had this weird, I guess you'd call it a hobby, but at the time it was more of just kind of like a weird gimmick about myself. I would get really weird or more like mundane pop songs stuck in my head all the time, just radio hits of the 2000s. And the way that I coped with the music in my head, I thought, well, it's not going to come out anytime soon. I think I just need to make an arrangement of it. And so I would arrange anything that got stuck in my head for either marching band or show band, jazz band, pep band, that kind of thing. And eventually at some point during my senior year, Dr. Williams said, hey, would anyone like to try to arrange something for the Halloween show? And I said, I would love to. And he took me up on it. And before we knew it, the Green Brigade Marching Band put my arrangement of a whole bunch of Halloween spooktacular type things on the field and brought it to life, which was the coolest thing ever. And that was another moment where I thought, this is kind of cool. I need to put more time and effort into this. And so that just kind of became my two loves, is just, music education and music composition. Once I graduated and I started teaching, we started playing pieces by really big name composers in the educational band repertoire, like Brian Balmages and Willie Owens. And one of the schools that I worked at brought out Willie Owens to clinic our band. And just a shot in the dark, I was like, hey, I write as well. Could you give me any pointers? And Willie goes, well, yeah, send me something. And I was like, really? I wrote something for my band last semester. We just kind of just messing around. It's nothing really. He goes, no, send it to me. So, okay. And so I sent him Lost Woods Fantasy, and I wrote it specifically for my non-varsity band at Griffin Middle School there in 2018. And it was just a way to bridge the gap. I had taught those beginners, love those students with all my heart. They just had a really unique skill set going into the next year. And I wanted to write a piece that sounded cool, that also kind of bridged the gap between their beginner year and year seventh graders, where most of my band was comprised of seventh graders. So to me, it was just a cool way to engage the kids. But I sent it to Will, and he goes, okay, so you're going to get an email from somebody. And I was like, wait, what? And the next correspondence I got was from Brian Balmages, who said, hey, cool piece. Would you mind making a separate trumpet 2-part? And I was like, cool, sounds good. And he goes, all right, we'll do it. And I was like, do what? And he goes, we'll publish it. And I was like, publish what? We'll publish your piece, right? And I was like, what, are you serious? Like that? He goes, yeah, it's awesome. And ever since then, I've, every time I write something new for band, I say, hey, Brian, what do you think about this? He goes, oh man, I love this. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it's become this really awesome working relationship where I just kind of send stuff to him, and he kind of mentors me a little bit and sends me some guidance. And occasionally he'll go like, hey man, this is great. We got to put this on our catalog. And so that grew from just the one piece that they published back in 2019 to about 4 that they have out now at this point. So that's been a kind of a wild ride, but that's basically how I got started.
I want to dig into something you said when you said that band was a safe haven, because I think that's something that resonates with lots of band kids, lots of orchestra kids, choir kids, is that, the ensembles and the friends we make in those ensembles becomes our peer group. And it also, we feel this sort of sense of community. And I kind of want to dig into that a little bit more. What did Mr. Schmidt do to create that community? And is there something that you take from that you use with your current group?
That's a really insightful question. The biggest thing I remember Mr. Schmidt providing for us as kids was always just stuff we had no business doing. He took pride in, his work at the school. He, loves kids. He loved his job. He would provide things to the Perry Middle School students that we would visit college campuses and perform on the stage at TCU. We performed at the Meyerson at one point. There were all kinds of cool projects that he had going on. When I was a student there was a commission project where he would literally every single year reach out to a different composer and say, hey, could you write a piece for my group? And every year he would commission a new work, and it'd be a new thing, and it was titled something different every year, and it was a different experience, different instrumentation, different moods of pieces. The very first one that I remember is called Asante Madakta, and I think by Bart Ginn, if I remember correctly. That don't quote me on that, but I think that might be the composer of that piece. But Asante Madakta was the coolest band piece I had heard, and that was the song that was performed by these 7th and 8th graders when I was just a sixth grade beginner. And it was already this new and fascinating world to me as a new budding musician, and to see slightly older kids perform at such a high level with music that was brand new, catered specifically to them, I think was just a really remarkable, really special experience. And so just things like that, I thought, wow, we're so lucky to be able to do stuff like that. And well, when I teach, I try to find moments like that, and try to get to know my students well enough to kind of program some of the things that they're interested in, and kind of refer to them over the course of the year. Just off the top of my head, a couple of years ago, when The Greatest Showman came out, that was all anybody talked about for a good 6 months. And so at the end of that year, I did an arrangement of all like some of The Greatest Showman, like their biggest hits, and fuse it with my favorite Broadway musical of all time, Dear Evan Hansen. And I called it The Best of Pasek and Paul. And that arrangement, I mean, we sat down as a band and we read it the day after UIL contest, and they loved it immediately. Almost none of the notes were right, but they were laughing and smiling. And it was just, I knew that was going to be a special experience for them. And, we worked on it real hard, and they performed it really well at the spring concert. What they didn't know at that performance is that in the beginning moments of the piece, I would actually pose. So the beginning of the arrangement that I did for them was taken from the opening of The Greatest Showman, the oh, whoa, boom. And I posed for the first time at the concert. They actually didn't see it coming, and they got a good laugh out of that. But just moments like that, I like to create really special, just special things like that every year to kind of, just make band what it is, which is, a safe haven and a place of community where people find themselves. I certainly found myself in the band program. And so every chance I get, I love providing stuff like that for my students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a different kind of community. I played sports in high school, but I never felt as close to the fellow sports like my teammates as I did to the band people. It would, if the choice was the basketball team or the band, I was always going to go to the band.
Sure.
It's just the way that was. I think there's just more time together, more shared experiences. I don't know. There's something about it that's really special.
Absolutely.
Anyway. All right, JaRod, let's talk tuba a little bit. So
sure.
As the listeners of my show know, I believe that my narrative is that I'm a frustrated low brass player. I was trumpet major through college, and I don't play much anymore. And I believe that had I been given a trombone as a child, the path would have been smoother.
Okay.
So tell me about this. So you said that you were given the tuba, you took to it right away, and then you were Texas All-State Band for 4 years. That's impressive. Where was that drive coming from as a kid? Do you remember what it was like to practice and get better, and what was driving that?
Oh yeah. The thing that did it for me was the fact that I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere else. And we're talking all the way through elementary school. I had friends there. I remember recess vaguely. I remember the weird basketball goal that didn't have a net. It was just a ring. I remember the blacktop. I remember all the things that kids usually involve themselves in elementary school, but I never really felt like I found my niche until I got to middle school, and specifically into the middle school band. And like I said before, I tried everything else before tuba, and there was something about that instrument that just clicked right away. And that was really kind of the first time that had happened in my life. And so really as a kid, and I think this is kind of the secret sauce that educators want, right? They how do I get my kids to practice? Because that's the one we have to get better. And how do we make kids want to get better? How do we get them to have that drive? And for me specifically, it was just, tuba was so cool. I couldn't stay away, and I played it just because it was fun. And it was, wow, this is so much different than in elementary school, because we were given those loud recorders and everybody played recorder for exactly 10 minutes. And then we ran around the room for the other 20. And tuba was different. And I wanted to do that as much as I could, coupled with the fact that at Perry, we were typically done with the day around 4:15, and didn't really have a whole lot of transportation going on until my mom would get off of work real late. And so being a couple miles from my house, I would just kind of hang out in the band hall until, I was ready to come get picked up. And by the time my mom would come get me, I would have played tuba probably for an hour. And that just kind of was the almost daily routine for several years. And I was always excited to do more stuff. Every time I learned a new skill or accidentally played a new note or discovered a new range or concept or something like that, I was excited about it, and I just exploited it and, practiced it more and more. And it was also helpful to have that culture of, well, hey, I'm a sixth grader, and also in this band hall practicing are all these older seventh and eighth graders. And, oh man, is that a forte piano? Is that what that sounds like? Cool, I'm going to do that like Franco did it. That was really cool. And so there was always that culture of, there were just kids that really wanted to get better at Perry Middle School. And that drive is I think, just one of the special things about that campus in particular. It was there when I was a student. It's there now. One of my most recent jobs was at Carrollton High School, and I'd go over to Perry all the time, one of our middle school feeders. And it's still like that. And the kids in that community are just still so driven, and they want excellence, and they want to be good, and they want to be good at being good. And it's just evident in the teaching and the kids, and that's something really special. And so that really propelled me. And by the time I got to high school, I was familiar enough with my instrument and the skill set necessary to just look at an all-state etude and just figure it out. I mean, I didn't have it down by day one, but I could look at it and go, oh, okay, that's not bad. And again, just as a freshman, excited about high school band, because that's, this completely new experience that everybody gets to do. And when they cross that threshold from after their eighth grade year, I was excited about that. And there was more tuba in high school. That's cool. I mean, are you kidding me? That's the best thing ever. And then here's this music that was even harder than it was in middle school. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Let me go practice. And that was kind of what helped me kind of propel through that. And I just remember playing tuba a lot. I remember playing for my family a lot, and my family wasn't really made of musicians, but they appreciated the fact that I was involved in something like band and in a cool organization like that. I'd always say, hey, JaRod, don't you have that trombone? Can't you bring it out and play it at Christmas? I was like, well, okay, I mean, sure. But yeah, I played my instrument all the time just because it was fun. And I looked up one day, and all of a sudden I could just play way more than I could the year before. And that was the trend every year that I played. I mean, even to this day, I play too with the Carrollton Wind Symphony currently. And it's a really fun group to play in. We haven't really had much of a season this past year for obvious reasons, but I've been with them. This be my, fourth year or so with them. And it's just such a fun group to play. Jim McDaniel leads that group, and the music that we play is pretty challenging, but also really fun. And the members of that group are really good. And so it's fun to kind of have something to work towards, in a performance aspect, because, the job takes up, a considerable amount of time. Of course, you get to teach your heart out. And then it's cool on Tuesday nights to go over to Creekview High School and play tuba in a band that's playing stuff like, El Camino and, just stuff like that. So it's just good to stay engaged with stuff like that. And I love getting better, and I love my instrument. And every time I play, I just want to be better than the day before and the day before that. So that is definitely what helped me, especially in high school, get through stuff like that. I asked my private lessons teacher when I was a freshman, not really knowing what the process was, but I asked my private lessons teacher, Chris Pineda. I said, hey, do you think I could make All-State? And he goes, probably. And then the next thing he says is, all right, now go practice. And so I kind of took that kind of as a challenge. And I didn't really know what I was up against, really. I didn't really know what the competition was. But I knew that, if I played enough and if I sounded good enough, that could be a goal that I could meet. And I mean, just by the skin of my teeth, they took 3 tubas from that area that I auditioned in, and I was third chair in the area my freshman year, and certified me for Texas 5A All-State. So from there, it was just like, okay, how can I do better than the year before? And how can I do better than the year before? My senior year, I really outdid myself, and I didn't even do All-State on tuba that year. My senior year, it was bass trombone, and I made the jazz band. I was first year in the state, and my previous band director, Mr. Brandon Huff, gave me so much flack for that. They're like, man, JaRod, like you can't even stick to your own instrument. You never even got first year in the state on tuba. Man, that's lame. But that's one of those things where I fell in love with jazz the same way as I fell in love with tuba, and it's the same kind of idea, just better and better every day.
All right, so you said a bunch of stuff in there, and I saw that you played in the Disney band. Is that as fun as it looks?
Oh, it is more fun than it looks. You just have no idea what it's like until you get there. And I thought, cool, you get to play tuba in the park. What I didn't know is that the people that they select for that group are not only amazing musicians, they are amazing people. And the hang was always so much fun. It's real tight-knit group, small group, 21 people, but still like just the coolest experience ever. And as much as I love jazz and kind of got into it, I still wouldn't really call myself a jazz musician. I have way too much respect for my contemporaries in that band that played just killing. They were just killing at their instruments. The saxophone section, just, oh my goodness. Our TA that summer, Alex Hahn, was in the 1 o'clock. Daniel Dickinson just released an album. Jose Rojas is doing amazing things in Florida. Wesley Perry's, just killing beautiful tenor sound. And this Gerard Johnson, who we call G, this real fat baritone sound. I have not heard a better saxophone section in my life. It was truly amazing. And on top of that, just hanging out as soon as we were done at the park, just chilling in the dorms where they provided us lodging. Was even cooler. Everybody in that band was amazing at their instrument, and they were terrific company, and it just made performing with them all the more special. And of course, they train you on how to have like the Disney look, with the clean cut and the shaved face and everything, and you point with 2 fingers instead of 1, and you high five people in between notes. Kids with cotton candy that like reach up and say, "Yeah, high five," and But it was just the coolest experience ever. And I remember seeing a clip of the previous year college band, the 2013 college band. That they showed in the lobby during our auditions. And I thought, well, this is just way cool. And the set that I just so happened to see was in front of the Matterhorn, and they were, playing a whole bunch of Disney songs and stuff like that, which, believe it or not, is only a part of the set list. We also played stuff like Earth, Wind, and Fire, Michael Jackson. But the set that I remember seeing, at least the part that wrote me in, was that set in front of the Matterhorn. And when I then got to when I had my turn and I went with the band and we played a set in front of the Matterhorn, and we would stop and we'd pose and we'd play. And every single time I look up at that ride, and I just thought, this is incredible. I never got tired of it. And that's just the kind of thing that it was really, really nice to see just years of practice and efforts and just improvement pay off in such a big way. And I have to say, like, every time I have performances like that and I'm offered opportunities like that, I'm always just blown away with being able to contribute with, what is just humbly just my passion. And I just hope that I make whatever experience that I'm involved in just as best as it can possibly be. But that summer, it was truly one of a kind.
So the other thing you mentioned is that you played in tuba Euphonium Quartets while you were at North Texas. Did you work much with Brian Bowman?
Oh, absolutely. He was the one that headed up the primary tuba euphonium ensemble, of course, as the professor of euphonium and as, I think, the most legendary member of the brass staff at UNT. If I can speak freely about that, I don't think anyone would have any qualms with that statement at that particular time. But yeah, he was in charge of the 6 o'clock tuba euphonium ensemble. Was primarily graduates, and they had like kind of multi-level. So like the 6 o'clock was like mostly graduates. The 7 o'clock was like really highly skilled undergraduates, some graduates in there a little bit. And the 8 o'clock was I guess delegated to entry level, typically freshman, sophomore, that kind of thing. But yeah, I eventually got to play with the 6 o'clock and play under Brian Bowman. And I mean, just wonderful musician doesn't even begin to describe. I mean, one of the things that I remember specifically was just practicing a 16th note passage. And I was just excited to be able to do that on too, because it's not every day that we get to play stuff that's, active. But I'm just, and he said to me, and he goes, "Why is it so heavy? It doesn't have to be loud." And I think that was the first time I had heard that in relationship to playing fast stuff. Because one, tubas don't really get to play fast stuff a lot of the time in many of their traditional roles. And two, now that we were actually playing stuff like that, it was the best thing ever. It was exciting. I was fired up, and I was playing it like that. And it was like, oh, no. And I just remember that. And I was just like, oh, you can play it quietly. I just, senior in college, and that was one of the things that I was just like, wow, I did not think about it like that at all. It just completely changed my world. And as all of his euphonium students will tell you, he had plenty of nuggets of information just like that would transform how they would play. And I think that speaks volumes about just the kind of person that Brian Bowman is, and how wonderful of a teacher and player that he is. And how awesome that euphonium studio was, and the tuba studio was under Don Little, who I had a pretty close relationship with. I studied with Don for most of my time at UNT. Wonderful, wonderful teacher. So yeah, that was a really, really fun studio to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one last question about school and sort of your growing up, and then we're going to get into kind of more contemporary stuff. When did you know exactly that you were going to be a music professional? How young, and what was that moment?
I don't know that there was one in particular, but rather a bunch of really large hints that that's what I needed to be doing. The first of which was how quickly I took to the band as a sixth grader. And I thought, oh, this is something that I really enjoy, and I'm kind of good at it. Okay. I'm going to do this for a long time as much as I can. And another really big moment for me was being a part of my high school leadership team with the R.L. Turner Band, getting to be section leader for several years and eventually brass captain. Doing the music thing and also helping people was a unique but equally rewarding feeling of just personal prosperity. And so that was one of those light bulb moments. I was like, hey, I really like this. And then I think the nail in the coffin was my entire collegiate experience. UNT is known for just how big it is and how versatile they are with all of the things that they can do and offer. And like I had mentioned before, I was involved in like all of the music stuff. I had played in orchestras and bands, chamber groups of several different kinds of instruments, including my voice. And that was, majoring in music in college is a pretty big indication. But while I was a music major, with every passing year, it just became more and more evident that this was my world. And definitely by the time I student taught at the very end of my degree, with the Creekview High School Band and the Blaylock Middle School Band, also in Carrollton, that was just it. I was like, yeah, this is great. And so when I finished my student teaching experience, I knew for sure, yeah, I'm going to be a band director, and there's like nothing out there that could tell me otherwise, which is kind of a powerful thing to think about now, because in retrospect, I think I may have had that thought moments before I received a phone call from Jason Shio saying, hey, JaRod, I'm so excited to tell you about this open position at Berkner High School. We're looking for fall graduates. Would you like to apply? And just kind of dumbfounded, I just kind of like put the phone down for a second, and I turned to Art Rungtip, who was my cooperating teacher, and I was like, how do you get a job? How does that work? Like, what is that? Because I think I'm getting a call about a job. Does that happen? And Art goes, no. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. When can we meet? What do I need to do? What do I need to wear? And just immediately, and they picked me up so quick. And that experience at Berkner was amazing with how organized they were. The love that they had for their kids was evident, and how monster of a program that they were. And they just took me under their wing, which was just fantastic. And that was it. The rest is history.
Let me ask you, you got that job offer from Berkner, and that's amazing. What were your early days like? We always talk about how it takes 5 years to settle into this career, but we also all know that first year can be something. And so why don't we dig into that, those beginning years?
Oh boy, it's fun. Well, I will tell you this, to frame it. I think I can best kind of sum up my experience at Berkner as really student teaching 2.0. They hired me as a professional. I was teacher of record of a sub-non-varsity band. I taught beginners. I worked with the jazz band, but I learned so much there. I could look in any direction, and a consummate professional was making a difference in a world-changing, history-making, one-of-a-kind way. Jason Shio, who had just taken the reins from Frank Troika, who in his first semester as head director at Berkner was phenomenal. And the kids took to him right away, and just his leadership was incredible. And right under his command, Chris Bronson was incredible at his job and conducted just the snot out of the non-varsity band. And to my ears, they sounded like a high school 6A varsity band most of the time. And the same could be said about Steve Torrance, who did a phenomenal job with Sim 3. And the same could be said about Chris Pineda, who was just killing it with the Liberty Junior High Band, as well as Annie Gulick, who was his assistant, and Andrew Week and David Becker and Kim Bean. I mean, the whole team was good. The whole squad was good. Mike Garcia, who is just a world-changing percussion instructor. Scott Ward, he wrote and taught and did all of it at the same time, and was always around to help and be good. I could always pick up a pen and go, that's good, I'm stealing that. That count off was really short. Let me do that. Wow, his right hand did not change tempo once in the entire last page of La Fiesta. Or just any number of things. And one of the things that I really liked about Berkner was the team aspect of it, and how we learned from each other. And then we learned from Lynn Jackson, who would come over every so often and teach the kids, yes, but also teach us, the directors. And that's where I really, really earned my strides. And Lynn, I love her to death. She's incredible. She's such a wonderful, kind person, and just loves kids and loves music. And she loves me enough to let me have it when I was really not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And she would, she'd tell it straight. And I would learn so much just under I guess, everybody's kind of guidance and influence. And it was one semester there at Berkner because they hired me as the interim, but I felt like after that point, I had taught for several years, just because of how much information and the quality of instruction and the infrastructure of the program is so many positives about it that I have so many takeaways.
One of the things when I think about Texas is, how it mentors young band directors. My first high school band director job, I was fresh out of school and I was the only band director. There was no one around really to help me, just the other band directors in other schools. And so, one of the things I think about Texas that's really special is the way, you're expected when you graduate to go in as an assistant director and you work your way up through the system. And that mentorship, can you talk to that a little bit maybe?
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing you do as a graduate, when you're applying for jobs, and if you get a gig, the smartest thing I think you can do as especially a band director is to be somebody's assistant. The mentorship, the infrastructure is already set in Texas public schools, where band programs I mean, we're very fortunate to have enough directors, I mean, plural directors, and that may be kind of strange to, listeners of the podcast that may not necessarily be from Texas or know what that's like, but in many places there's at least two. And of the at least two, there's the one that's at least older and more experienced. And it's just good to get in there and learn. I mean, teach, yes, but I'm a firm believer that teachers still need to learn, like after they graduate from school. School is just the part that certifies you to go learn more while you teach. And I mean, one of the smartest things that I think, anyone applying for jobs could do is to look for districts and band programs where they could see themselves fitting in, where they can provide all of their strengths and at the same time find a really good mentor, which I feel like I had that at Berkner. And even when I went on from my Berkner days and into Griffin Middle School, when I was there for 4 years, and my head director, Carolyn Chancellor, she's amazing at teaching woodwinds. And as a brass guy, you graduate and you think, well, I play a brass instrument, so I'm a brass guy, I'm a brass girl. And if you get a middle school job, then you're probably the most comfortable teaching brass. Or if you're a woodwind person, if you play clarinet, you're probably most comfortable teaching woodwinds. And I loved how Carolyn taught woodwinds. I mean, she was great with her clarinets. Her flute sounded amazing. Like I remember just sitting and watching her rehearse her varsity band, and I would help when needed, but most of the time I'd just be taking notes because I'm like, wow, I would not have known what to say to that flute child in most contexts, as far as like, young band is concerned, because a lot of the really good pedagogy, the most important pedagogy, and where it's the most on display, I think, is in the middle school band hall. I mean, you really have to know how to teach and break concepts down, and especially with beginners, you're building them from the ground up. So, I mean, it's just really important to be able to get to do something like that, as opposed to just going straight into a gig that, if you have to teach beginners and you're by yourself and you have both woodwinds and brass, as we would all hope you do with full instrumentation band, you rely on your training in the schools to kind of get you through, but it's not really the same as, seeing somebody do it who's been doing it for a while and been doing it well. So, I was really fortunate to be able to get to be a part of that, and also just kind of take notes and apply that to my own teaching.
All right. And so there's something else that you said. I'm going to tie to band director. Then we're going to talk about you as a composer. You mentioned that when you were at North Texas, you had the opportunity to arrange for the North Texas Marching Band, and how that was an amazing experience. How can we as band directors give opportunities for kids and a diversity of kids to have those opportunities where they can feel empowered to write, to compose, to arrange? How do we do that?
That's a great question, and I absolutely vibe with that, because I think that's the reason why I was able to dive so deeply into music in the first place, is because my first band director, Mr. Schmidt, provided us with opportunities like that. Like I had kind of mentioned before, I mean, he gave us stuff that we really had no business like looking at. I mean, we could, with the commission project and everything, every year, that was the first time I really kind of appreciated what a composer did. I knew what a composer did, because you learn about composers in elementary music and you apply them across, whenever you get to perform with fine arts in middle and high school. But it's kind of this knowledge that doesn't really, oftentimes you're just kind of like, oh yeah, this person wrote this piece, like this person wrote a book. But how many times do you get to meet that person or hear about their process? And like when Mr. Schmidt would invite like Mr. Gent, to come work with the band and everything, I was like, hey, this is the person that wrote this piece. That was kind of a life-changing moment where all of a sudden I could connect with this entire different world of music production and consumption. So yeah, I mean, just really as far as like my classroom, I don't know that I consciously do a whole lot um, in the way of um, like providing my students with like composer type interactions, but of course by osmosis. And because I'll say, hey, this is a piece that I just threw together. Let's read it and see, hey, y'all like it, and kids are interested in that kind of stuff too. And it without fail, every year I at least get one kid to reach out to me and say, hey, Mr. Hall, I really like the fact that you write for band. I just got this app called Notepad, can you, or I got MuseScore. Can you listen to my arrangement? It's, three clarinets playing, Win the Saints or, whatever it is. And I mean, I love it, man. Yeah. Write more, do more. And without fail, whenever they send me stuff, I'm like, hey, that man, look at you using 4-part harmony. That's awesome. Yeah. Send me more. I mean, it's another Lynn Jackson saying, when there's a door open, you rush through it. And whenever there's potential like that, or anybody that even slightly exhibits any interest in stuff like that, I mean, you just shine a light on it, because I mean, that's all it took for me. And who knows, that's all it could take for so many students. And so, which is kind of why, I guess towards the beginning of the conversation, we kind of talked about what special experiences, can be provided to kids and stuff like that. Every year I try to do something special like that, just based on the interest of the kids that I teach, because you never know. I was really fortunate this year at Sam Houston Middle School in Irving. My colleagues decided to feature me on kind of an assembly. We didn't really physically assemble. We use Zoom, most of us are proficient in Zoom by now. But they invited me to speak just to the school on Zoom, just kind of about my compositional experience and everything. And I got to talk to the kids about, hey, like, do the things you like, enjoy them, do it a lot, and spend time with it. Spend your efforts on it. Go all out. Continue. Keep it up. Do it in high school. Go to college. Because in college, I met all the folks that, I owe so much of my success to, is through just the school system and going through Perry Middle School and R.L. Turner and eventually UNT. The sky's the limit. And so I got to kind of talk to them about that. So it's just really important to be able to provide them with stuff like that. So again, nothing like real big and intentional and just kind of self-consuming, but I do, I literally, whenever somebody reaches out to me with even the smallest interest in that kind of stuff, we just run with it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The psychology of music books talk about how beginners, the encouragement is the most important thing when someone's beginning something. It's not criticism. It's not like lessons. It's just encouragement. Simple.
Absolutely.
So, JaRod, I'm going to ask you a question. You can steer me away from it if you want. I don't know what your comfort level is here, but so, historically, we know that most composers look like me. Not quite as handsome as me, but they look like me.
Sure.
When was the first time that you saw a composer that represented you?
Well, it's probably Willie Owens.
Do you remember when?
And I will say that's late enough in my life where I got to tell you, if I wasn't as fortunate to have the experience I had, I don't know that I would have ever met anyone that looked like me and did music or compose and band direct,
And so, this idea of representation matters. It does. Absolutely. Because I've always identified I could be a composer if I want to. And so I kind of want to get to that. Is there something we can speak to that to make that situation better so that there's more JaRods coming through our world here, giving us great music?
Well, anyone listening right now, I'm going to tell you what Willie told me. What kind of advice, what kind of tips, tricks, or whatever. Just go write. Just do it. We need more of it, and just go do it and go learn your craft and go get as good as you can and just write. Just write and, make your connections, go to class and do your things and be good at what you do. Be the guy, be the girl that gets talked about in your friend group. Go practice and be good at your instrument. Be good at hanging out with people. Be a good hang. Just go right, because we need more of it, and eventually somebody will listen.
It's a little bit better, but it's still not great. And, I'm really pleased that, voices like yours are being, heard and added to the mix. I think it's a really good trend. And so anything I can do to encourage that, in our kids.
Sure. And while we're on the topic of representation, just off the top of my head, like the two names that I can think of in the wind band medium, up and coming young Black composers, Kevin Day, Quinn Mason.
So you mentioned, you told a little bit of the story, how you sent some music to Willie and then he sent it on to Brian and Brian gave you a call, and it's all happened really fast, is what you kind of told me before we started recording. So you kind of walk us through that, from the ride in the last 2 years for the listeners who may not know your music and may want to know a little bit about you and what you're writing.
Sure. So we talked about like the hobby of just kind of writing down and arranging stuff. And I, like, on my computer right now, I use a computer program called Sibelius. And I know that has probably turned the heads of like half the audience. It's like, Finale's better, which, it is what it is. I used Finale for about 2 seconds when I was like kind of late in high school going into college. I couldn't get into it. Sibelius is what Mr. Schmidt used when he was in the band hall. And one of the side projects he had for me was going and inputting all of the scores that he had into Sibelius for solo and ensemble. And because we didn't have pianists, we didn't have accompanists, we didn't have any sort of live, when we played our solos and stuff like that for contest, it was with a boombox. And he would export all of his MIDI files on Sibelius through like either CD or floppy disk. And so we'd kind of, we'd use that. And he'd say, just put them into Sibelius and it could like make a little, kind of electronic version of the notes on the page. Well, I use that to write and arrange and everything. And what really got me going after college was writing for my band. Because one of the things that I became the most obvious to me was just that we needed more variety in the grade 1 area of, teaching young musicians to play kind of their first or second concepts musically. They're just, it's better now, and there's a lot more stuff out there. But while I was teaching, at Griffin, I would kind of thumb through our library and everything, and I found the best pieces I found were usually written by Brian Balmages and Willie Owens and Jack Wilds. And just those kind of pieces that really inspired me. And so at the end of the day, I'd, say, we've kind of played all the greatest hits, and I'd kind of look through the other stuff in the library, and I just was kind of left wanting. And so I started writing. At first it was exercises from my band just to supplement what we would need to rehearse, but then they were full-blown pieces, and eventually Lost Woods Fantasy, which is what it is today. But that was the kind of start of the publishing process. Was I didn't know that was even an avenue or possibility for me. I just was writing for my band because I wanted them to be really good, and I wanted them to play really cool music. And I thought, well, let me make something. And again, I was really fortunate because we were able to bring in help from the outside. And Willie wrote a piece that we were playing with, not my band, but the varsity band was playing tutor sketches. And so we brought Willie out to work with them to do tutor sketches. And the kids loved him. And I remembered him. I remembered his name. I remembered how charismatic he was and how good of a musician and a great director he was, and wrote this amazing piece. And I think I made it a point to program more stuff of his after that. I already liked it. But I made it a point to do more of that because I thought, wow, this dude is awesome. Like, he really knows his stuff, and the kids love him. So maybe we could have him out again. Well, by the time I had started writing pieces for my band, that was kind of my secret, like, wish. I was like, okay, so hopefully we can get Willie back out. So I can like show him this piece, I was like, and so the varsity band did another one of his the following year, Tahoka Gallop. And so, And Carolyn was like, okay, cool. We'll just bring Willie back. That the kids would really like him. And I snagged him after rehearsal and I said, hey, thanks for working with the kids. He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I showed him Lost Woods Fantasy. And when he sent it to Brian, he was really impressed with it. I didn't think he would be impressed with it. I just, was just kind of showing him, just kind of like, this is my weird hobby. And he goes, no, this has professional artistic merit. And so when he sent it on over to Brian, he kind of emailed me back with some specifications because Brian is a marketing genius. Like he knows the idiom, he knows the kids, he knows grade levels, he knows what sounds really good for what like level. I was like, well, yeah, this is a really cool like grade 1.5. I wouldn't call it a 1 because I really like the spirit of the piece, but the range on the trumpet here is a little higher than we typically sell a grade 1.5. So while it's there, I mean, hey man, just add a second trumpet part and that like fits the mold of what we sell as 1.5s all the time. And so that became kind of the relationship there. Anytime I had like this new idea and I flesh it out on the keyboard and get it in the computer and in Sibelius. And like if I'm like, hey, this is really cool, I send it to Brian, like, hey man, what do you think? And I mean, he's given me feedback all the time, even things that he doesn't pick for publication for FJH, he'll gladly give me feedback on and stuff like that. And he's been a really good mentor in that way to kind of give guidance. And I will say this, that I think is unique. I don't think he's ever tried to change the core of my piece. He's never tried to shift the direction of my like artistic style. He's never stifled my voice in any way. On the contrary, he's amplified it. And he always offers, suggestions and kind of works with me in ways that just kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, amplify kind of what's already there. And I always feel like whenever I send something to Brian, it's always better and it's always more me, which is really cool. It's not more him, it's not more Willie, it's more me. And he kind of gets me to think outside the box a little bit and also just really get in there and write some really good music. And so his feedback is monumental and so grateful for him to be able to do that. But that's just kind of been the back and forth now for, I guess, 2 years. It started with Lost Woods Fantasy. And then the following year, it was Tripwire and Bridget's Cross and Critical Call, which are out now. And those are kind of my like recent trifecta. Critical Call is a 1.5. Tripwire is a grade 2 and Bridget's Cross is a grade 3. And some more hopefully on the way. So
now, do your kids know you're a composer? I mean, you give them pieces, but do they know like the implications?
I think this year definitely helped when I was able to talk with my school and the assembly. Like the topic of the day was, hey, Mr. Hall is a composer. Can you talk about what that means and what you do and how you got your start? Kind of like some of the topics on this podcast. And I think that was maybe their first real exposure to like a real life composer, because I mean, we learn about him in elementary music, but kind of like I was kind of saying before, it's one of those things that you may not necessarily get the real world connection or application, at least not right away in a traditional sense. When you go to the middle school, you just kind of, oh, this piece is by this person and that information is just kind of filed away. But there they could speak with and interact with, a living, breathing composer. So this year, yes. Last year, so when I taught at Arl Turner, a couple of the students knew, and I wasn't like real big on it, but they found out, like especially the seniors who were just like, oh yeah, my favorite piece ever is Moscow, and do you write for FJ? Is that why we're playing FJH stuff this year? I mean, how do you? And I was like, well, I mean, it's cool music. It's not why we're playing it, but I mean, yeah, it's cool stuff. And I had a couple of students last year that kind of knew, but yeah, it's nothing that I like hammer every day and I'm just like, composer man. It's one of my hobbies that sometimes helps with my job, and sometimes is helpful in many other ways. And when I can and when it's applicable, I share it with my students. And if for nothing else, just to make their learning process easier in the classroom. And if they have fun along the way, that's great. And if they learn a little bit about the composer thing, even better.
You mentioned that when you were in middle school that your band director was having you transcribe into Sibelius. That must have taught you some lessons about arranging and composing just through transcription. I mean, we all know the sort of the apocryphal stories about Bach or Mozart transcribing Bach or whatever it is, those sort of things.
Sure. Yeah, that I think you're right about that. That's definitely where I got like my start. And yeah, it was literally putting piano reductions into Sibelius, and like the keystrokes were, just common enough and ergonomic enough that I got really fast at it really quickly, and I would just finish like a whole stack of them. And then when I was done, I would just kind of be like, well, what would it sound like if I just kind of like did some other stuff? And I would like create my new file. And at first I didn't really know what was original. I didn't have like, millions of songs in my head that had been bubbling around since birth. I don't think that's really how that worked. I think the very first thing that I wrote, and I put that in quotation marks because it's definitely not my original work, was the one of the themes from Donkey Kong 64, because I was an avid Nintendo 64 gamer dude, and it was I think Mr. Snyder's theme, the fox, when you go get all the secret spy gear and everything in the game. And I remember writing that down into Sibelius, because that was stuck in my head. And there goes the story. It was in my head, and I got it out into Sibelius, and I arranged it for, at the time it was just brass, because I was like, yeah, tuba I guess is kind of low and trombones in the middle and trumpets are up high, so let's do a trio and write way too many notes for every instrument. And eventually it just kind of turned into this arrangement, and I really didn't know what it was called back then, but I just kind of wrote that theme down on the proverbial paper. It was a computer, because it was in Sibelius, but and the playback feature on it really got me excited, because then I could kind of go and review and edit my work. And it's interesting, writing has done just wonders and has improved my playing and teaching leaps and bounds, because even at an early age, I'm writing down stuff that I don't really understand yet, or just things that I hear, and I'll write it down in something that sounds like a half note, but it's a little bit longer, and I'm like, why does it last 3 beats instead of 2, and that kind of thing. Ranges of instruments and stuff like that I learned from Sibelius, that like colors the note head red if it's a little too high, and I said, I guess trumpets don't really play those notes a whole lot. Okay, so let me bring it back down. Or writing in the key of E minor, because that's the key of Mr. Snide's theme in Donkey Kong 64, and having not played in E minor as a sixth grader, just stuff that I had no business knowing or learning at the time, and it just accelerated my musicianship on a kind of a profound level now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was thinking a little bit about our conversation a little bit earlier about how to empower kids, this year, because I haven't had 4th grade beginners, I've been doing Soundtrap with them, the online DAW, where they're like learning how to do loops and songs, and very rudimentary with 4th grade. But, next year when we start the method book, I'm thinking about having those kids like create little 4-bar, 8-bar backing tracks for their method book lines on Soundtrap.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, just kind of let them apply that knowledge with the instrument they're learning.
Yeah, I'd seen that once before, that kind of concept at Clark Middle School in Frisco. I don't think the students were creating the loops, but I think back then it was John Timpany and Ben Katz and Scott Kennedy that just made like backing tracks for like the Essential Elements book. And there's stuff out there already in the EEI stuff, and they're interactive, and like Smart Music is really good for that too. But they made their own like techno dubstep. It was really funny. It was also really cool, and the kids loved it a lot. So there's value to that for sure.
The thing is, if you have it on the computer in the DAW, you can change the key, you can change the tempo, you can manipulate the materials as you need for the kids. It's not just what's on the recording.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Ann Molesky, and I'm the host of the Anna Krusik Podcast, another podcast in the Muted Network. It's my mission to help music teachers be more purposeful, sequential, and joyful in each and everything they do as teacher musicians. Join me every Thursday as I share tips, tricks, and meaningful conversations with other music teachers about how to make the general music classroom more intentional and impactful for both you and your students.
All right, JaRod. So let's go on to these final questions because we've been doing this for a while. And so this is a series of questions I ask every guest, and they form kind of like a common theme among all the guests. So as people listen, they can get different ideas. The first of these questions is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Well, I think like the way I think about competition is best put in a quote that I came across only in my recent years as an educator. And I will misquote it, but it is something to the effect of, competition is, a road that you take, pacing each other towards excellence. And so, one of the frustrating things about this year in particular when teaching band is somehow reminding the students, or even just showing them in the first place, that this scenario, this is not real band, where all their friends are at home, or where transportation issues are wonky, or where schedules are weird and messed up, or where classes are cut short, or maybe made way too long. It's really weird, and motivation and just kind of that drive to get better sometimes is shunted by that. And I think the very first spark that I saw in my beginner trumpet class was when I offered the idea of a chair test to them. They're like, "What's a chair test?" I'm like, "Oh, a chair test. Chair test is like a regular test, but I take your grades, and your grades are secret, but I rank your grades, and those rankings, you'll know, it's like a race. If you finish first, you were first place. Well, there's a first chair, there's a second chair, and I'll go all the way from best to least best." And that turned heads. I was shocked, and I think just in the way of getting them to experience kind of the next level of their playing, that little bit of friendly competition served its purpose. The line that I would draw is when competition is all you seek in and of itself, and it becomes about beating others. It becomes about the material things. It becomes about the things that weren't really in the process. I think the process of preparing for competitions is where you gain the most stuff, where you really get to kind of enjoy the ride. And so I think that's where I would draw the line on that. Healthy competition, I think, is good. Unhealthy competition, I would characterize as self-centered, self-consuming, isolated in terms of its impact on not only yourself but on the others around you. I think competition where you are striving to be a better version of yourself is the way to go.
All right, JaRod. This is a question that is interesting because everyone has a different balance in their life. And so how have you found a work-life balance in your career so far?
Well, I try my best to do everything I can at work and just do everything, get it all done, show up. Just go at it from the time I walk in the door until it's time to leave. And when I leave, it's all about everything that's not work. Naturally, there's always stuff that pops up. And band directors are usually not as good about this because there's all kinds of, we have competitions on Saturday. There's a concert tonight. We have a beginner drive coming up in a couple weeks. But all of the planning, all of the teaching, all of the data and drive, as much as it can happen at school, the better. There's always stuff that kind of leaks over. But I definitely try to work hard and then play hard. So, when I go home, I am on my newly bought Switch, which I think about 30% of the U.S. bought a Switch this past year, and I'm on Breath of the Wild, and I get the chance to decompress and relax and just kind of unwind and take care of my mind and myself before I start the next day. Because if I am not my best self when I step in front of those kids, it's a disservice to the kids. So,
all right, JaRod, this is a monstrously huge question, but if you just answer it from your perspective. What are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
There are several angles we could take with this. I think I'll stick with, I guess, the common theme of this episode, which we've kind of happened upon organically, which has been representation. I think there needs to be a Black kid in the classroom that can look up and see an excellent Black teacher and go, "That's cool. Let me go do that." I think there needs to be every kind of human being in the classroom teaching kids to be excellent, because excellence has many colors and shapes and forms. And the more we have of it, the better. One of the challenges I see now, one of the things that I think could cause some potential roadblocks in the future, I don't think that currently music education looks like that. I think that the national conversation, I think, is trending towards a place where that will be fixed in the very near future. But the more ways to be good to each other, the better. And that starts with every kind of good teacher being in the classroom and being a light for these kids. Because if they can see themselves in you, then the next incarnation of that band or that school or that district is going to be exponentially better than when you found it.
All right, JaRod, I just invented a time machine, and I'm going to take you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you going to tell yourself?
I don't know how weird this would come from me as future me talking to not future me. But, as we know, with all of the movie tropes that start to introduce time travel, it just very quickly becomes a can of worms. But taking all the theoretical, no multiverse is happening, no butterfly effects. I think I would say the sentence that I would not have heard as much at that point in my life. And I think I would say, man, I'm proud of you. Because honestly, all anyone needs when they're at the edge, when they're transitioning to a new point in their life, when they're going on to their next step, when they're taking on a new project, whatever, they just need that extra little bit of support. And who better from the version of me that's already killing it, And I think that's what I'd say. I'd say, man, I'm proud of you.
That's awesome. That never goes away, by the way. Man, that might be one of the top 10 answers to that question. So, JaRod, this is not meant to be a morbid question, but it's really meant to get at the heart of the piece of music that means the most to you in some way without putting a value judgment on it, right? So it could be anything. Okay. And so what would be the last piece of music you'd want to conduct, perform, listen to? What would that be?
That's a good one. I think it would probably be one of the pieces I performed with one of the All-State bands. And if I had to narrow it down, it would be the first piece I ever rehearsed with an All-State group, which just so happened to be Shostakovich 5, the finale. That would be a pretty sick final concert. That'd be awesome.
All right. So, JaRod, I asked this of composers. Of your pieces that's been published so far, and I know there's only a couple so far, but you have many more coming. I can feel it. What piece would you want to direct people to listen to get to know who you are as a composer? Which of those? Okay,
I'm actually glad that you asked this question. I love Lost Fantasy with all my heart. It will always have a special place in my soul for the students that it was designed for. Um, I really want people to listen to Brigid's Cross. I'm really proud of my writing in that piece specifically. I think my soul speaks the loudest in that piece. I think you can probably hear a little bit of my journey in that piece. I think you can get a little bit of my personality in that piece. You can hear elements of everyone who's ever like touched my life in that piece. There's like in my friend group, my best friend in the world, Eric Wood, is a clarinetist, and there's a clarinet choir section. There's a saxophone solo. One of my good buddies, Brandon Jones, is a saxophonist. My wife is a French horn player, and there's some good horn moments in that piece. And I think with its expression and just the musical storytelling, that's the one.
All right. So this is a strange year because it's COVID-19 year, but I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. Usually I ask, is there anything coming up that you'd want to share or promote? But I'm going to ask you that, but also add in, what are your plans? What are you writing? What are you going to be working on?
Well, the planning stages of this are, of course, very, very early, and I won't release more details than I think the beneficiaries will be comfortable with at this time, but I am writing a piece in memoriam of a dear friend of mine who's no longer with us, and hopefully inviting his former contemporaries to play along, and if they still have their horns, to play along with the group that's going to premiere it at some time in the year 2021, possibly in the spring of 2022. So I am excited about that. I'm sure the students who I'm writing it for will be equally as excited to perform for just, a live audience. But also, I think that's going to be a cool piece. So details coming up, but that's, in a nutshell, that's one of the projects that I'm really, really excited about. And there is one piece that I believe is coming out through FJH this spring, which is an arrangement of mine. I think this is actually, this is my first published arrangement, and is a setting of Loch Lomond, which is grade 2 for band. And I love the wind band idiom. I think that's because all I've known is band. But yeah, so that's exciting too. That is coming out this spring, I believe. And coming up, I'm actually out of the realm of composition. My wife was actually accepted to medical school, and will attend the University of the Incarnate Word School of Osteopathic Medicine in San Antonio. So we're packing up and we're going to move down there this summer. And that relocation will be pretty cool. We've already kind of scouted the area out, and the area that we're looking at living is gorgeous. I'm excited for that. Change of scenery, kind of a change of pace and everything. So definitely excited about the move and kind of. Oh yeah, thank you. I mean, she's brilliant. She's been working so hard on this stuff, so I'm so proud of her for getting in. And that's going to be a really, really cool thing. So we're going to get set up here in San Antonio probably by early July or so. So I'm excited about that as well.
JaRod, how can people get in touch with you?
My email is kind of a funny one to spell. But if you know how to spell my name, which is JaRod, my email is Geronimo. So JaRodAmo, Geronimo @gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. Great.
There's I guess in the way of like some of the publications that are out there, they're through the FJH website. So I'm also listed as a composer on the FJH website as well. Mm-hmm. But I guess primary contact would probably be that email, Geronimo @gmail.com.
Excellent. And everyone, if you're listening and you can't remember that or you forget that, just reach out to Brian, and Brian will, I'm sure, pass it along, or reach out to FJH.
Sure.
All right, JaRod, it was so wonderful to talk to you. I mean, it was really great to meet you, and truly, you inspired me here. I'm like, I want to go write music. I want to go practice my trumpet.
Oh, so. That's awesome.
That's what we want.
Likewise, man. It's good to sit down and talk band. That's what we do, right?